Have you ever thought that winning could be your greatest mistake? That the moment of triumph might actually be the beginning of your downfall? This video will change how you see success, power, and the invisible trap that destroys conquerors, billionaires, and empires. Because the truth is, most people don't fail because they aimed too low. They fail because they didn't know when to stop. Law 47 from the 48 Laws of Power states, do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop. This sounds simple, almost obvious. But it contradicts everything modern society teaches us. We are told to dream bigger, push harder, never settle, always expand. Growth is worshipped. Ambition is celebrated. Restraint is seen as weakness. But here lies the most dangerous illusion of power, the belief that more is always better. Let me tell you a story that will reveal why this law might be the most important of all 48 laws. It is a story about human nature, about the psychology of winning, and about the invisible moment when success transforms into poison. In ancient times, there was a Persian king named Cyrus the Great. He built one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. He conquered Babylon without a battle. He freed the Jews from captivity. He was called the father of nations, the anointed one. Historians consider him one of the most successful rulers in human history. But Cyrus the Great died in a pointless war against a minor nomadic tribe called the snatched. After conquering most of the known world, after achieving everything a man could dream of, Cyrus could not stop. He had to conquer one more territory. And that final ambition killed him. This pattern repeats throughout history with mathematical precision. Napoleon Bonaparte conquered most of Europe. He could have stopped. He could have consolidated his empire. Instead, he invaded Russia in the winter. Hitler controlled Germany and most of Europe. He could have stopped. Instead, he opened a second front and invaded the Soviet Union. Alexander the Great conquered the known world by age 32. His men begged him to return home. Instead, he pushed into India, and though he won battles, his army mutinied. He died at 33, his empire fragmenting immediately after his death. These are not random failures. This is a pattern embedded in human psychology. And it affects not just ancient conquerors but modern corporations, startup founders, investors, and even ordinary people climbing the ladder of success. The moment you achieve your goal, a strange thing happens in your brain. The goal that once seemed impossible now feels insufficient. The victory that would have satisfied you yesterday feels empty today. And a new, bigger goal emerges. This is not ambition. This is addiction. Neuroscience has discovered something fascinating about how our brains process achievement. When you pursue a goal, your brain releases dopamine. But dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure. It is the chemical of pursuit. It is released during the chase, not after the capture. So when you finally achieve your goal, the dopamine drops. The satisfaction you expected never fully arrives. Instead, you feel a strange emptiness. Your brain immediately searches for the next target, the next challenge, the next conquest. This is why billionaires keep working to make more billions. This is why successful people often seem unhappy. This is why victory rarely brings peace. The ancient Stoic philosophers understood this 23 centuries before neuroscience proved it. They called it the hedonic treadmill. They observed that human desire is infinite, but human satisfaction is temporary. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who commanded the most powerful military force on earth, wrote in his private journal, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions." He understood that external achievements can never satisfy internal hunger. But here is where the story gets darker. Going past the mark you aimed for does not just make you unhappy. It makes you vulnerable. It creates the conditions for your destruction. And this happens through 3 distinct mechanisms that I will now reveal to you. The first mechanism is overextension. Every resource is finite. Your money, your energy, your time, your attention, your reputation, your allies, your luck. When you achieve your original goal, you have usually spent most of these resources. You are at maximum extension. This is the moment when you should consolidate, rest, and fortify your position. But instead, intoxicated by victory, you push forward. You commit your remaining resources to an even bigger goal. Now you have no reserves. No buffer. No safety margin. When something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, you have nothing left to protect yourself. The momentum that carried you to victory now carries you past the cliff edge. Consider the story of Nokia. In the year 2000, Nokia was the king of mobile phones. They controlled 40% of the global market. They achieved their goal. They won. But they kept pushing. They diversified into telecommunications infrastructure, gaming devices, luxury phones, multimedia. They tried to be everything. They overextended. Meanwhile, Apple focused on one thing, making the iPhone perfect. Nokia's overextension created complexity, bureaucracy, and distraction. When the smartphone revolution arrived, Nokia could not adapt fast enough. By 2013, Microsoft bought Nokia's phone division for just $7 billion. A company that was worth $300 billion at its peak was dismantled because it did not know when to stop. The second mechanism is the creation of enemies. When you achieve your goal, you have usually made some enemies along the way. This is inevitable. Competition creates conflict. But if you stop at your mark, consolidate, and become gracious in victory, those enemies often accept the new status quo. They adapt. They move on. But if you keep conquering, if you threaten more territories, more markets, more kingdoms, you force everyone else into a defensive alliance against you. You transform competitors into existential threats. You unite your enemies. This is exactly what happened to Microsoft in the late 1990s. Microsoft dominated operating systems. They won. But they could not stop. They tried to dominate web browsers by bundling Internet Explorer with Windows. They tried to dominate media players. They tried to dominate everything. This aggressive expansion triggered antitrust investigations in the United States and Europe. Competitors who normally fought each other united against Microsoft. The company faced years of legal battles, billions in fines, and restrictions that limited their growth for a decade. Microsoft's refusal to stop at their mark created the coalition that nearly destroyed them. The third mechanism is the corruption of judgment. Victory is intoxicating. It floods your brain with confidence. You start to believe that you are invincible, that the rules that apply to others do not apply to you, that your success proves your superiority. Psychologists call this the winner's curse. Your victories become evidence that you cannot fail. So you stop listening to advisors. You stop doing the careful analysis that made you successful. You start taking bigger risks. You confuse luck with skill. And you make catastrophically bad decisions while feeling completely confident. Look at what happened to General Electric under Jack Welch and his successor Jeff Immelt. For decades, GE was the model of corporate success. But the leadership became convinced they had unlocked the secret formula for infinite growth. They expanded into finance, entertainment, plastics, aviation, healthcare, energy. They acquired hundreds of companies. They used massive amounts of debt. They believed they could manage any business in any industry. This confidence was the result of previous victories. But the complexity became unmanageable. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, GE nearly collapsed. The company that was once the most valuable in the world had to be broken apart. The empire destroyed itself through overconfidence born from past success. Now let me reveal something that sounds wrong but is actually true. Knowing when to stop requires more intelligence, more discipline, and more courage than knowing when to start. Anyone can begin. Anyone can dream big. Anyone can commit to a goal. But recognizing the moment when you should stop, when you have achieved enough, when further expansion creates more risk than reward, that requires wisdom. This wisdom is rare because it contradicts our evolutionary programming. For 99% of human history, we lived in conditions of scarcity. There was never enough food, never enough safety, never enough resources. In that environment, the optimal strategy was simple: take everything you can get. Accumulate. Expand. Grow. The humans who stopped when they had enough did not survive. The humans who kept hunting, kept gathering, kept conquering passed on their genes. We are the descendants of people who never stopped. The instinct for infinite accumulation is hardwired into our DNA. But we no longer live in that world. In modern society, the danger is not scarcity. The danger is overextension. The danger is complexity. The danger is having too much to defend, too many obligations, too many commitments, too many battles. In this environment, restraint is survival. Knowing when to stop is power. But our ancient brain does not understand this. Our ancient brain still thinks we are hunter-gatherers in the African savanna where more is always better. This creates a fundamental conflict between our instincts and our interests. Your instinct screams, push forward, take more, expand, grow. Your interest whispers, consolidate, fortify, protect what you have won. Most people follow their instincts. And most people eventually lose everything. Let me give you a modern example that perfectly illustrates this principle. Consider the story of WeWork and its founder Adam Neumann. WeWork started with a simple, brilliant idea: rent office space long-term at low rates, redesign it beautifully, and sublet it short-term to freelancers and startups. The business worked. By 2014, WeWork was profitable and growing. Adam Neumann had achieved his goal. He built a successful company. But he could not stop. He started calling WeWork a technology company, not a real estate company, to justify a higher valuation. He expanded into schools called WeGrow. He launched a residential division called WeLive. He talked about solving world hunger and achieving immortality. He convinced investors that WeWork was not just a company but a movement that would transform human consciousness. The valuation reached $47 billion. Adam Neumann became a billionaire celebrity. And then reality arrived. When WeWork tried to go public in 2019, investors actually read the financial documents. They discovered massive losses, conflicts of interest, and corporate governance that gave Neumann almost absolute control. The initial public offering collapsed. The valuation dropped from $47 billion to $8 billion in a matter of weeks. Neumann was forced out. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. The company that could have been a successful, sustainable business nearly went bankrupt because its founder could not stop at the mark he aimed for. Now compare this to a different story. Stuart Butterfield founded a gaming company called Glitch. The game failed. But while building the game, his team created an internal communication tool. Butterfield recognized this tool had more potential than the game. So he made a decision that most founders cannot make. He shut down the game, the thing he spent years building, and pivoted entirely to the communication tool. That tool became Slack. Slack grew explosively. By 2019, Slack was worth $20 billion. Other companies would have kept expanding, adding features, trying to compete with Microsoft, Google, Facebook. But Butterfield recognized the limit of Slack's advantages. He knew Microsoft Teams, with its integration into Office, would eventually dominate the enterprise market. So in 2020, Butterfield sold Slack to Salesforce for $27 billion. He could have tried to keep fighting, keep growing, keep competing. Instead, he stopped at the mark. He won. And he protected that win by exiting at the right moment. This raises a profound question. If going past the mark is so dangerous, if overextension destroys empires and companies and individuals, why does almost everyone make this mistake? Why is restraint so rare? The answer lies in understanding the social and psychological forces that push us beyond our limits. The first force is social comparison. Humans do not measure success in absolute terms. We measure it in relative terms. You do not feel rich because you have $10 million. You feel rich because you have more than your neighbor. You do not feel successful because you achieved your goal. You feel successful because you achieved more than your peers. This means that satisfaction is impossible. There is always someone richer, more powerful, more successful. And as long as that person exists, you feel the need to keep going. This is why billionaires compete with other billionaires. Elon Musk does not work 70 hours per week because he needs more money. He works 70 hours per week because he is competing with Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and other billionaires for status, for legacy, for the title of most successful. The goal is no longer wealth or comfort. The goal is winning an infinite game against other ultra-competitors. And infinite games, by definition, have no stopping point. The second force is identity. When you spend years pursuing a goal, the pursuit becomes your identity. You are the entrepreneur building a company. You are the athlete training for championships. You are the executive climbing the corporate ladder. Your sense of self is tied to the pursuit. So when you achieve the goal, when you reach the mark, you face an identity crisis. If I am no longer pursuing this goal, who am I? This question is terrifying. It is easier to set a new goal, a bigger goal, than to answer that question. So you keep going, not because you want the new goal, but because you are afraid of the emptiness that comes with stopping. The third force is structural momentum. Organizations, companies, movements, they develop their own momentum. A company that grows 20% per year for 5 years creates systems, processes, and expectations around that growth rate. Investors expect it. Employees expect it. Customers expect it. You, as the leader, expect it. When you reach your goal, you cannot simply announce, "We are done growing, we will now maintain." The system will not allow it. Investors will sell the stock. Employees will leave for faster-growing competitors. Your board of directors will replace you with someone who promises more growth. The machine you built to reach your goal does not have a stop button. It only has an accelerator. This structural momentum is why most public companies eventually fail. They are legally required to maximize shareholder value, which Wall Street interprets as maximize growth. A company cannot tell its shareholders, "We are successful enough, we will stop expanding now." That would be considered a failure of leadership. So companies expand into markets they do not understand, acquire companies they cannot integrate, and take risks they should not take, all because the system demands perpetual growth. And eventually, almost inevitably, they overextend and collapse. Now let me share with you the dark truth, the dangerous knowledge that most people will never understand. The ability to stop at the right moment is not a skill you can learn from a book or a seminar. It requires a complete rewiring of your relationship with desire, identity, and success. It requires you to separate your sense of self from your achievements. It requires you to find satisfaction in sufficiency rather than superiority. It requires you to value protection over expansion. And most people cannot do this. Most people are psychologically incapable of stopping. This is why Law 47 is perhaps the most difficult of all 48 laws. It is easy to be ambitious when you have nothing. It is easy to be cautious when you have never won. But to be restrained in the moment of victory, to voluntarily stop when you could keep going, to protect rather than expand when every instinct screams for more, that requires a type of wisdom that is almost supernatural. Let me tell you about someone who mastered this law. His name was George Soros. In the 1990s, Soros was the most successful hedge fund manager in the world. He made billions betting against the British pound. He could have kept taking bigger risks, kept leveraging more, kept trying to break more currencies. Instead, he gradually reduced his fund's risk. He moved from aggressive speculation to more conservative investing. He started giving away his money to his open society foundations. When other hedge fund managers were doubling down, Soros was stepping back. In 2011, after 60 years of managing money, Soros returned all outside capital and converted his firm to a family office. He stopped playing the game while he was still winning. And because he stopped at the right time, he preserved his fortune, his reputation, and his influence. Today, at 94 years old, George Soros is still alive, still active, still powerful, because he understood Law 47. Compare this to the story of long-term capital management. This hedge fund was founded by legendary traders and two Nobel Prize-winning economists. They developed mathematical models that seemed to guarantee profits. For 4 years, they were right. They generated 40% annual returns. They expanded their leverage. They increased their positions. They believed their models made them invincible. They went past the mark they aimed for. In 1998, when the Russian government defaulted on its debt, long-term capital management lost $4.6 billion in 4 months. The fund collapsed. The Federal Reserve had to organize a bailout to prevent a global financial crisis. The smartest people in finance destroyed themselves because they did not know when to stop. Now I want to address a question you might be thinking. Does this mean I should never be ambitious? Does this mean I should play it safe? Does this mean I should settle for mediocrity? No. That is not what this law means. This law does not say, do not aim high. It says, aim at a specific mark, and when you hit that mark, stop. The key is the specificity of the goal. Most people have vague goals. They want to be rich. They want to be successful. They want to be powerful. These goals have no endpoint. There is no point at which you can say, I am done, I achieved it. So you keep going forever, always chasing, never arriving. This is the trap. Law 47 requires you to define the mark precisely. Not, I want to be rich. But, I want $10 million in liquid assets. Not, I want a successful company. But, I want a company with $50 million in annual revenue and 20% profit margins. Not, I want to be powerful. But, I want to be the director of this department. When you define the mark precisely, you create the possibility of stopping. You create a finish line. And when you cross that finish line, you have a choice. You can set a new mark, but you must do so consciously, carefully, after considering the costs and risks of further expansion. You must ask yourself, do I actually want this new goal, or am I just afraid of stopping? Am I pursuing this because it serves my interests, or because I am addicted to pursuit? Am I being strategic, or am I being compulsive? Most people never ask these questions. They just keep going. And they wake up one day, exhausted, overextended, surrounded by enemies they created, managing complexity they cannot handle, wondering how their victory turned into a prison. Let me give you another historical example that reveals the full depth of this law. After World War II, the United States was the most powerful nation on Earth. America had the atomic bomb. The strongest military. The largest economy. The dollar became the global reserve currency. America had won. But America could not stop. Within 5 years, America was fighting in Korea. Then Vietnam. Then Iraq. Then Afghanistan. Each war was sold as necessary, as defending freedom, as protecting American interests. But each war drained resources, created new enemies, and overextended American power. By 2020, after 20 years of war in Afghanistan, the United States withdrew in chaos. The Taliban retook the country in weeks. America spent over $2 trillion and lost thousands of soldiers to end up exactly where it started. This is what happens when you go past the mark you aimed for. America achieved its goal in 2002, destroy Al-Qaeda's base in Afghanistan. But America could not stop. The mission expanded to nation-building, to democracy promotion, to remaking Afghan society. And that expanded mission failed catastrophically. Meanwhile, China watched. China did not invade countries. China did not overextend militarily. China focused on economic development, infrastructure, technology. While America drained itself in endless wars, China built. And now, in 2025, China is positioned to become the dominant power of the 21st century, not because China was more aggressive than America, but because China understood Law 47 better than America did. This pattern appears everywhere once you know what to look for. Brazil in the early 2000s achieved economic stability under President Lula. Inflation was controlled. Growth was strong. Millions were lifted out of poverty. Brazil had achieved its goal. But then Brazil tried to become a global power. The country spent billions hosting the World Cup and the Olympics. The government expanded social programs beyond what the economy could sustain. Corruption flourished. By 2016, Brazil was in recession, the president was impeached, and the country was in political chaos. Brazil went past the mark and paid the price. Spain in the 2000s achieved prosperity. Unemployment was low. Living standards rose. Spain had recovered from decades of dictatorship and become a successful democracy. But then the government and banks tried to become a European powerhouse. They borrowed heavily. They built massive infrastructure projects. They created a real estate bubble. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, Spain collapsed. Unemployment reached 25%. The economy shrank for years. Spain went past the mark and lost a generation of prosperity. The more examples you examine, the more you realize that this is not about individual failure. This is about a fundamental feature of human systems. All successful systems contain the seeds of their own destruction. Success creates confidence. Confidence creates aggression. Aggression creates overextension. Overextension creates vulnerability. And vulnerability creates collapse. This is the cycle. And the only way to break the cycle is to voluntarily stop at the peak, which almost no one can do. Now let me reveal why this law is actually about something deeper than strategy. It is about the relationship between desire and suffering. The Buddha taught 2,500 years ago that the root of all suffering is tanha, which is usually translated as craving or desire, but more precisely means thirst. Not the desire for something you do not have, but the inability to be satisfied with what you do have. This is why rich people are not happier than middle-class people. This is why winning does not bring peace. This is why achievement feels empty. Because the problem is not the absence of success. The problem is the presence of infinite desire. Law 47 is a law about liberation. When you learn to stop at the mark you aimed for, you break the chain of infinite desire. You prove to yourself that you are not controlled by your cravings. You demonstrate that you can choose satisfaction. This does not mean you become passive or unmotivated. It means you become sovereign. You pursue goals because you choose to, not because you are compelled to. And when you achieve those goals, you can enjoy them, because you are not already obsessing about the next goal. This is the secret that successful people discover too late or never discover at all. The point of success is not to enable more success. The point of success is to enable a good life. And a good life requires limits, boundaries, and the wisdom to know when enough is enough. Let me share one final story that brings all of this together. There was a fisherman in a small coastal village. Every morning, he would take his boat out, catch enough fish to feed his family and sell a few at the market, and return home by noon. He would spend his afternoons playing with his children, having lunch with his wife, and napping. In the evenings, he would play guitar with his friends and drink wine. One day, a tourist, a successful businessman, saw the fisherman relaxing at 2 in the afternoon. The businessman said, "Why are you not out fishing?" The fisherman replied, "I caught enough fish this morning." The businessman said, "But if you fished all day, you could catch more fish." The fisherman said, "What would I do with more fish?" The businessman said, "You could sell them and save money." The fisherman said, "What would I do with more money?" The businessman said, "You could buy a bigger boat." The fisherman said, "What would I do with a bigger boat?" The businessman said, "You could hire employees and catch even more fish." The fisherman said, "What would I do with even more fish?" The businessman said, "You could open a fish processing company, then a distribution network, then a restaurant chain." The fisherman said, "How long would this take?" The businessman said, 20 or 30 years. The fisherman said, "And then what?" The businessman said, "Then you could sell the company for millions and retire." The fisherman said, What would I do then? The businessman said, then you could spend your afternoons playing with your family, having long lunches, napping, and playing guitar with your friends in the evening. The fisherman looked at the businessman for a long moment and said, but that is what I do now. This story is usually told as a lesson about not needing to be ambitious. But that misses the deeper point. The fisherman has mastered Law 47. He defined his mark, enough fish to live well. And he stops at that mark every single day. He is not lazy. He works every morning. But he knows when to stop. And because he knows when to stop, he enjoys the fruits of his labor. He is not driven by anxiety about the future. He is not comparing himself to other fishermen. He is not trying to build an empire. He has enough. And enough is a superpower. The tragedy is that most people never experience enough. They spend their entire lives in pursuit mode. They sacrifice their present for a future that never arrives. They destroy their relationships, their health, their peace of mind in pursuit of goals that, even when achieved, bring no satisfaction. And they do this because they never learned Law 47. So what do you do with this knowledge? How do you apply Law 47 to your life? Let me give you a practical framework. First, you must define your marks precisely. Write down specific, measurable goals. Not vague aspirations, but concrete targets. How much money do you need to feel secure? What job title or position represents meaningful success? What size should your company be? Force yourself to be specific. Second, you must examine your motivations. For each goal, ask yourself, why do I want this? Am I pursuing this goal because it serves my genuine interests, or because I am comparing myself to others? Am I trying to prove something? Am I running from something? Am I afraid that without this goal, I will be worthless? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Because if your goals are driven by fear, insecurity, or social comparison, you will never stop. You will keep moving the mark further away every time you get close. Third, you must practice satisfaction. This sounds simple, but it is revolutionary. When you achieve something, anything, pause. Do not immediately look to the next challenge. Actually experience the achievement. Feel the satisfaction. Let yourself be proud. Rest in that moment. This is training your brain to associate achievement with satisfaction rather than anxiety about the next goal. Most people skip this step entirely. They achieve something and immediately minimize it, immediately focus on what they have not achieved yet. This trains your brain that achievement brings no reward, only more pressure. And if achievement brings no reward, why would you ever stop? Fourth, you must build systems that force you to stop. Do not rely on willpower or discipline. Create external constraints. Set a rule: I will not expand my business beyond this size. I will not work more than this many hours. I will not pursue net worth beyond this number. Write these rules down. Tell other people about them. Create accountability. Because in the moment of opportunity, when you could expand further, your instincts will scream yes. You need external systems to enforce the no. Fifth, you must prepare for the identity shift. When you stop pursuing a goal you have been chasing for years, you will feel lost. This is normal. This is the moment when you discover who you are beyond your achievements. This is uncomfortable. Most people run from this discomfort back into pursuit. Do not run. Sit with it. Explore it. Ask yourself, who am I when I am not chasing something? What do I value beyond achievement? What brings me joy beyond winning? These questions lead to the deepest wisdom. And finally, you must accept that this law will make you different from most people. Most people are driven by infinite desire. They will not understand why you are stopping. They will call you unambitious. They will say you are settling. They will tell you that you could do more, be more, have more. You must be prepared for this. You must be strong enough to choose sufficiency in a world that worships success. This is the ultimate test of character. There is another dimension to this law that deserves exploration. It concerns the psychological phenomenon known as the arrival fallacy. This term was coined by positive psychologist Tal Ben-Shahar to describe the false belief that reaching a valued destination can sustain happiness. The arrival fallacy explains why so many successful people experience depression after achieving their biggest goals. Olympic athletes after winning gold medals. CEOs after taking their companies public. Authors after publishing bestsellers. They reach the summit and discover it is just another place, not the paradise they imagined. The arrival fallacy creates a dangerous pattern. You set a goal. You work toward it. You sacrifice for it. You tell yourself that once you achieve this goal, you will finally be happy, finally be satisfied, finally be at peace. Then you achieve the goal. And you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel empty. So you conclude that the goal was too small. You needed a bigger goal. And you set an even more ambitious target. You repeat the cycle. And each time, the satisfaction is briefer, the emptiness deeper, the need for the next goal more urgent. This is the treadmill of ambition. And most high achievers are running on it until they collapse. Law 47 offers the escape from this treadmill. It teaches that the solution is not bigger goals. The solution is changing your relationship with goals entirely. Goals are tools, not destinations. They provide direction and motivation, but they cannot provide meaning or satisfaction. Those must come from within. When you understand this deeply, you can pursue goals without being enslaved by them. You can achieve victories without needing them to fill an inner void. You can stop at your mark because the mark was never the point. The point was who you became in the pursuit. Consider the lives of two tech founders. The first founder builds a successful company. It reaches 100 million in revenue. He takes it public. The stock price soars. He becomes a billionaire. But he immediately starts thinking about his next company, his next billion, his next achievement. He works 80 hours per week. His marriage fails. His children barely know him. He has ulcers and anxiety. He is successful but miserable. He cannot stop because stopping means confronting the emptiness inside him. The second founder builds a similar company. Same revenue, same success. But he approaches it differently. Before starting the company, he defined what success meant to him. Not just financial metrics but life metrics. Time with family. Health. Contribution. When his company reaches his predefined goals, he steps back. He hires a CEO to run operations. He moves to a chairman role. He works 20 hours per week. He coaches his daughter's soccer team. He takes long vacations. He invests in other entrepreneurs. He is successful and peaceful. He stopped at his mark because he knew what the mark represented: freedom to live well. These two founders had the same external success, but completely different internal experiences. The difference was not luck or personality. The difference was that the second founder understood Law 47. He knew that success without stopping is not success. It is just an expensive form of suffering. This brings us to perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of this law. Stopping at your mark actually increases your long-term power and influence. When you consolidate rather than overextend, you create a sustainable base. When you protect your victories rather than risk them for bigger victories, you ensure your legacy. When you demonstrate satisfaction rather than hunger, you inspire respect rather than fear. History remembers the conquerors who built empires. But history celebrates the leaders who knew when to stop. Think about the Rothschild banking family. They became the wealthiest family in Europe during the 19th century. They financed wars, kings, and nations. They could have tried to become political rulers themselves. They had the money and influence. But the Rothschilds understood Law 47. They stayed in banking. They did not go past their mark. They did not try to convert financial power into political power. And because they exercised restraint, the family maintained its wealth and influence for over 200 years. Most fortunes built in the 1800s disappeared by the 1900s. The Rothschild fortune survived because they knew when to stop. Compare this to the Medici family of Florence. The Medicis were bankers who became political rulers. They achieved financial success, then pushed into politics, then tried to control the church. They overextended. By the 1500s, the family had lost its wealth and power. The Medicis went past their mark, and it destroyed them. The pattern is clear. Those who understand Law 47 build dynasties. Those who ignore it build monuments to their own hubris. Law 47, do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop. This is not a law about being conservative or playing it safe. This is a law about being strategic. This is a law about sustainability. This is a law about protecting what you have won. This is a law about choosing satisfaction over endless hunger. This is a law about being free. The question is, are you strong enough to stop? Can you achieve your goal and then rest in that achievement? Can you resist the instinct to keep climbing, keep expanding, keep conquering? Can you say, this is enough? Because if you can, you will possess a form of power that most people never discover. The power of sufficiency. The power of restraint. The power of knowing that you control your desires rather than your desires controlling you. What will you do with this power? That is the question that will define your life. Will you keep chasing, keep expanding, keep going until you overextend and collapse? Or will you define your mark, achieve it, and stop? The choice is yours. But remember this, history judges conquerors by their empires. But wisdom judges them by whether they knew when to stop.